Decifrando o passado. Existe um poderoso grupo na Igreja Católica.
We are God's hands. We are the people to do God's work.
Chama-se Opus Dei.
This Pope was pointing his finger at this group and saying, this is the way to go.
No livro O Código da Vinci, eles são retratados como vilões.
It hurts me to see my family of Opus Dei be treated like some kind of mafia, which is ridiculous.
Já foram chamados de grupo secreto e seita.
You give up your life, you give up any money, you give up everything.
It was a fear of hell that allowed me to stay for so long.
Foram atribuídos a eles rituais de autoflagelação.
I don't do it because I like it. I do it because I dislike it.
Isso forçou o Opus Dei a se pronunciar.
We have a message that society wants to hear. We want to get our message across.
Qual será de fato a verdade sobre o Opus Dei? Tudo começou em 1928, com uma inspiração divina por parte de um devoto padre espanhol.
He felt God was calling him to create this new body composed of men at first, later, through another vision, men and women, priests and laity, and that the point would be not to do things in a church, but to get out into the street.
Seguindo o chamado de Deus, o padre José Maria Escrivá formou um novo movimento católico, ao qual mais tarde chamaria de Opus Dei, que em latim significa obra de Deus. Mas mesmo depois que seu polêmico fundador foi canonizado em 2002, muitos americanos não conheciam o Opus Dei. Isso até o Código da Vinci ser publicado um ano depois. Esse romance é uma grande conspiração fictícia que mistura arte, cristianismo, história e assassinato. Escrito por Dan Brown, o livro vendeu mais de 40 milhões de exemplares pelo mundo.
It's one of these very entertaining, fantastic, wild sort of page turners that, is fun to read when you're on an airplane for 2.5 hours.
Brown inventou que oculto nas obras de arte do grande mestre italiano Leonardo da Vinci há um código que revela segredos poderosos. Nessa ficção, Maria Madalena teria dado à luz um filho de Jesus Cristo, segredo que por séculos a Igreja teria ocultado.
Inconceivable, preposterous, the things that he says put as facts in the book about history. The sad thing is that many people get confused in this kind of type of faction, this mystery of fact and fiction, and people can't distinguish.
Nessa mistura de fatos e ficção está o modo como o romance retrata o Opus Dei. O Código da Vinci associa uma sinistra conspiração global às lideranças do grupo. Seu líder é retratado como um vilão diabólico. No centro desse complô macabro está um violento monge do Opus Dei, que não hesita em matar.
Imagine any other religious organization being named in a book like that and said that they do those kinds of things. People would be outraged, and yet, because Opus Dei, I think, is this conservative Catholic group, somehow that's just sort of been ignored.
As a Catholic, it hurts me to see Jesus kind of dragged through the mud in a certain kind of way, as he is in the book. It hurts me to see my family of Opus Dei be treated like it's some kind of mafia, which is ridiculous.
O Código da Vinci também, de modo dramático, retrata o ritual da mortificação corporal. Hollywood aumentou a notoriedade do Opus Dei com a sua versão cinematográfica do Código da Vinci. Estrelada por Tom Hanks e dirigida por Ron Howard. Para milhões, a única imagem do Opus Dei é aquela criada pelo Código da Vinci, em parte com base em fatos, em parte pura ficção. Mas haverá uma imagem pública que ainda não foi vista? Roma, Itália. No centro desta metrópole mágica está o Vaticano, sede da Igreja Católica Romana. Além das muralhas do Vaticano, há mais de 1 bilhão de católicos no planeta. Mais da metade dos cristãos no mundo são católicos. Dentro dessa imensa igreja existem ordens religiosas como os jesuítas, os dominicanos e organizações leigas como os Cavaleiros de Colombo e o Opus Dei.
Opus Dei is a way to have a relationship with God in your everyday life, not just on Sunday, but but every day, through every moment and every circumstance.
A mensagem espiritual do Opus Dei é que podemos encontrar Deus no trabalho ou no dia a dia. Que leigos em suas profissões seculares podem aspirar à santidade, a uma vida santa, e assim transformando o mundo à sua volta.
If you are a faithful, believing, conservative Catholic, sometimes you don't even feel at home in your own parish. You may not feel at home with your own friends. What Opus Dei gives you is an environment in which you feel at home.
O Opus Dei tem 87 mil membros em 61 países. É composto em sua maioria de leigos, médicos, bombeiros, fazendeiros, vendedores, alguns casados, outros celibatários. 2% são clérigos, incluindo padres, bispos e 2 cardeais. Mas nada de freiras nem monges.
I think the most important thing that Opus Dei has done for me is to help me understand the right balance that my life should have. The right balance between work, family, being a husband, golfing, and my faith in God.
Esses católicos profundamente piedosos seguem uma rigorosa rotina diária de missa, oração e formação espiritual.
It's not signing up at, a health club. Being a member of Opus Dei is a divine vocation, so God calls that person. Many people come into contact with Opus Dei, attend their activities, and don't join, because it isn't for everyone.
John Allen é correspondente no Vaticano da revista Repórter Católico Nacional e autor de um livro recente sobre o Opus Dei.
There are all kinds of Catholic liberals around the world who have never met an Opus Dei member, never been to an Opus Dei center, never read a book by Escrivá, who nevertheless are profoundly convinced that Opus Dei is something evil.
Alguns chegaram a acusar o Opus Dei de ser uma seita secreta e clandestina que alicia seus membros, possui fortunas fabulosas e que controla o Vaticano.
What I am doing is pointing out something that I believe is like a cancer. They ruin people's lives and tear families apart. That is not a Christian thing to do.
On the one hand, you have thousands of very holy and healthy Catholics living devoted lives of service in the modern world, which is terrific. On the other hand, there are some problems with Opus Dei that really need to be looked at.
Como esse pequeno grupo e seu polêmico fundador se tornaram o maior foco de controvérsia na Igreja Católica. Vaticano, setembro de 2005. Em um nicho externo da Basílica de São Pedro, uma estátua de mármore de 5 metros do fundador do Opus Dei, São José Maria Escrivá, foi inaugurada e abençoada pelo Papa Bento XVI durante uma cerimônia especial. O prelado do Opus Dei e seu vigário-geral em todo o mundo é o bispo espanhol Dom Javier Echevarría, membro desde 1948, além de amigo e secretário particular de São José Maria.
Così si comportava con il terra e così fa adesso in cielo con la perfezione propria delle anime che godono della visione di Dio. L'immagine che oggi contempliamo ne è un segno eloquente.
Personagem de grande magnetismo, São José Maria e a história do Opus Dei são inseparáveis. Espanha, país europeu de 42 milhões de pessoas, 90% das quais católicas. Em 1902, José Maria Escrivá de Balaguer nasceu em uma piedosa família católica. Na adolescência, Escrivá entrou para o seminário e, aos 23 anos, foi ordenado padre.
He was a person with a tremendous faith able to do anything to accomplish or to follow that faith.
O fato culminante na vida do jovem padre ocorreu em 2 de outubro de 1928. Durante um retiro em Madrid, ele ouviu badalar de sinos e foi agraciado com uma visão. Ele acreditou ser uma intervenção divina. Essa visão se tornaria o Opus Dei.
Amo al Opus Dei con todo mi corazón.
en cuanto es un instrumento para servir a la Iglesia, para servir a las almas, para contribuir a la paz y a la felicidad de las criaturas todas, al bienestar del mundo, también material.
Per fare un'opera della portata dell'Opus Dei aveva bisogno di strumenti forti. Per far palanca bisogna che ci sia una barra di acciaio, no? Però era al tempo stesso molto umile.
Em 1933, José Maria criou o primeiro centro do Opus Dei em um pequeno apartamento em Madrid. A Academia DYA tornou-se uma residência universitária e local de atividade apostólica.
Hardly anyone was joining Opus Dei, and those who did, some of them didn't stick around. And he's talking about Opus Dei as something that God has given to the church and that will last for centuries and forever. He's just a Spanish priest living in Madrid with a handful of people around him. And now that takes incredible faith.
Enquanto José Maria lutava para manter seu pequeno grupo, a Espanha mergulhava no caos. Disputas políticas, econômicas e culturais dividiam os espanhóis. A perturbação degenerou em guerra civil.
July 1936. The Spanish Civil War became a proving ground for Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Soviet Russia.
Os nacionalistas, conservadores e católicos em sua maioria, liderados pelo generalíssimo Francisco Franco, rebelaram-se contra os republicanos comunistas, cortando a Espanha em duas metades.
In the Republican side, priests were persecuted. That is a fact, and they were killed.
Seguiram-se brutais perseguições religiosas. Igrejas foram incendiadas, clérigos chacinados.
You're coming out of a period in which anybody who was a practicing Catholic in Spain probably had the experience of having to step over bodies to get to church. There were 4,000 priests who were killed, dozens of bishops, hundreds of sisters, in some cases lined up against walls in very public ways and shot to death by the Republican forces.
Forçado à clandestinidade, José Maria viveu como refugiado em meio ao terror e sempre em fuga. Encontrou abrigo neste sótão e fez-se passar por paciente em um asilo por 5 meses. Secretamente, celebrava missas e ouvia confissões.
He was carrying on his apostolic work as if nothing had happened. That he had the sense that he was doing something God wanted him to do and that nothing could stand in his way.
Em março de 1939, os nacionalistas emergiram vitoriosos. Franco assumiu o poder como ditador e governou a Espanha brutalmente por 36 anos.
People had paid in their own blood for their fidelity to the church. And so there was an enormous upsurge of Catholic pride, and there was an enormous upsurge of Spanish nationalism tied in the symbol of Franco.
São José Maria e o Opus Dei já foram acusados de apoiar o regime fascista e repressor di Franco.
È logico che i vescovi o che la Chiesa a un certo momento fossero più propensi a quelli che non li attaccavano. Questa è la realtà, no? Non è nessuna opzione politica, è una opzione di sopravvivenza della fede.
I think the fairest thing you can say is that Escrivá was neither pro-Franco nor anti-Franco. It's a fair matter for debate that he should have been more anti-Franco, particularly as the injustices of the regime became clear. He was trying to follow his vision, and his vision was that as an organization, Opus Dei was simply going to stay out of the political fray.
No dia em que a guerra acabou, José Maria contemplou as ruínas da Academia DYA. Mas 3 anos de conflito sangrento não destruíram sua visão para o Opus Dei. Mais tarde, em 1939, ele publicou Caminho, um livro com 999 sentenças ou pontos de reflexão.
Se não te levantas a uma hora fixa, nunca cumprirás o teu plano de vida. Obediência, caminho seguro. Obedecer cegamente ao superior, caminho de santidade.
He was writing things to encourage at specific moments this soul or that soul, and he was coming up with ideas that would help those people.
Caminho revela o projeto espiritual de São José Maria e do Opus Dei, apresentando tópicos como caráter, oração e tática, sem esquecer a privacidade do grupo.
Não exibas facilmente a intimidade do teu apostolado. Não vês que o mundo está cheio de incompreensões egoístas?
It is a foundational document for them. There isn't anything else. He did write a lot of other books later on in life, but this is the one that I would have thought that they carried in their pocket. It's the Opus Dei's equivalent of Chairman Mao's Little Red Book.
Em 1941, o Opus Dei tinha 50 membros. Na comunidade católica de Madrid, murmurou-se sobre um grupo sectário e clandestino de católicos.
There's been misunderstanding about what Opus Dei is about. This looks like they're being secret, but they're not really secret. They are just normal Christians, and people are unfamiliar with this way of doing holiness.
Essa busca pela santidade começou a chamar a atenção. O Opus Dei estava crescendo. A Sociedade de Jesus, ou Ordem dos Jesuítas, que tinha uma enorme presença no fervoroso catolicismo espanhol, julgou o crescimento do Opus Dei suspeito e se opôs a ele.
The root charge was that Opus Dei was a secret Catholic sect that was attempting to destroy the Jesuits, was attempting to divide the parishes, and somehow take control of the Spanish Church. The great historical irony here, of course, is that many of the same charges were made against the Jesuits back in the 16th century when they were founded, and they were the new kid on the block.
Inabalável, o padre José María buscou reconhecimento além da Espanha.
Escrivá knew that if he was going to expand anywhere, he had really to become a papally approved institution. In order to do this, he needed to go to Rome. So he sent his right-hand man, Álvaro del Portillo, to work towards a recognition.
But let's not kid ourselves. I mean, in part, it was also to be present at court, to learn the rhythms and the psychology of Vatican politics, to be able to make points. Opus Dei's leadership has always been very adroit at knowing how to move the levers of power.
Com a bênção do Papa Pio XII, o Opus Dei recebeu permissão para se expandir pelo mundo afora. A mensagem do Opus Dei criou raízes. Dos anos 50 aos anos 70, ela conquistou 60 mil membros em 32 países, inclusive os Estados Unidos. Faculdades foram fundadas por membros do Opus Dei. Lançaram-se atividades apostólicas e programas de caridade. Liderando essa campanha de espantoso crescimento estava São José Maria, carismático, encantador, apaixonado.
I don't think that you can explain the dramatic worldwide diffusion of Opus Dei in a very short arc of time without there having been something about this man that attracted people.
When you get a highly charismatic person who founds a new movement, there tends to be reverence for that person. In the case of Escrivá, it seems as if he encouraged it. He certainly didn't discourage it.
Em 26 de junho de 1975, após uma reunião matinal com membros femininos, José Maria voltou para a Villa Tevere, sede global do Opus Dei em Roma, desmaiou neste quarto e morreu de infarto. Tinha 73 anos.
En primer término, tengo que agradecer a Dios nuestro Señor estos 50 años de labor. Como un borriquito estoy delante de Dios, tirando del carro. Ese ha sido el oficio al que yo me he dedicado.
O padre Álvaro del Portillo, ex-engenheiro ferroviário, sucedeu José Maria como prelado do Opus Dei.
È apparso alla luce quando è morto il fondatore. Tutti abbiamo capito che lui era il degno successore, non c'era altro.
Hoje, no subsolo da capela de Nossa Senhora da Paz, em Villa Tevere, jazem os restos mortais de São José Maria Escrivá.
It was just incredible that he could be fiery, he could be funny, he was warm, a man who was really a volcano of love of God.
He would mention the weight that he felt on his shoulders being the founder of Opus Dei.
He knew that he has to accomplish God's will.
I've always thought he was a saint, very, very holy.
No entanto, os detratores de São José Maria retratam-no de modo mais crítico, lado negro.
He was very volatile. Had a mean temper. He could be nasty to people, especially to subordinates.
His reprimands were very serious and were strong, and he has a forceful character.
He's always struck me, he came across to me as a vain man, very concerned about his self-image, very concerned really about the people should know that he was a holy man.
Hijos míos, mis palabras son palabras sobrenaturales, son palabras de amor para todos. Yo no he querido en mi vida mal a nadie. Quiero bien a todos, y ahora sí.
If you think of him as a loving father, then you tend to forgive them and just sort of, chalk it up to him being a character. If you think of him as somebody who's running a secretive, controlling organization, then you would see it as another kind of, deep-seated personality flaw.
O grande legado de São José Maria são os 87 mil membros do Opus Dei, mas as práticas de alguns deles despertaram ceticismo e suspeita. Entre os 67 milhões de católicos norte-americanos, há 3 mil membros do Opus Dei. Esses católicos conservadores são pouco numerosos, porém tão normais quanto os seus vizinhos.
I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a plastic surgeon, and I am a member of Opus Dei.
I am Vice President of Human Resources.
I'm a college president.
I'm an educator, a coach.
I'm a retired guy. I'm an engineer. I run around a lot.
You got the full gamut, I think, of personalities and professions. The one thing we have in common is we want to live our faith on a serious basis every day.
Como alguém se incorpora ao Opus Dei?
Most members of Opus Dei, their first encounter is not through sensationalist TV programs or newspaper articles. It's through reading the works of Escrivá, introduced to them by other believing Catholics.
O Opus Dei também convida estudantes católicos a participar de retiros e reuniões de caráter espiritual.
Evangelization is a mission of the church. It's not something that Opus Dei invented. Every Christian is called to evangelize. We're called to spread the message of Christ.
People have charged over the years that they are deceptive about it, that they will sometimes bring people into their orbit before really telling them that this is Opus Dei, that they will pressure them to make profound life commitments before they really understand what it's about.
We were always being encouraged to get more members, make friends, bring them into formation somehow, bring them around the center, try to find out where they are in their spiritual life. Do they have the qualities to become a member of Opus Dei?
O Opus Dei nega exercer qualquer pressão indevida. Os candidatos em potencial passam por um longo período de estudo espiritual antes de serem aceitos.
From the very first formation that I went to, I wanted to join Opus Dei immediately, and they wouldn't let me. They said, not yet, slow down, take your time, you need to learn more about us.
When someone joins Opus Dei, they have a 6.5-year period in which they say, yes, I want to go ahead for another year, I do not want to go ahead for another year. So they are free to remain in the work and they're free to leave.
Há uma variedade de categorias de membros. Os supernumerários, 70% do total, são compostos por casais como Doug e Shirley Hinderer e sua família de 9 filhos.
I look at Catholicism as a framework for our life, and I think I look at Opus Dei almost as the color in it. It really helped us to look at who we were in more than just a couple and more than just a parent. I mean, it gave us a really well-rounded look at our lives as human beings, as Catholics, as parents.
They have a program of life, a spiritual program that they follow every day as Opus Dei members. They come together once a week for a kind of spiritual meditation and talk. The point is to receive the spiritual formation inside Opus Dei and then take that formation out into one's daily life.
A segunda maior categoria, cerca de 30%, é a dos numerários. Homens e mulheres celibatários que moram nos centros do Opus Dei e cujo compromisso de celibato constitui uma opção rara no mundo moderno.
These people have chosen to live a fairly controlled and disciplined life of spiritual sacrifice. If you've chosen to live that life, you've got to take it on its own terms. And by definition, that's going to be something that's hard for the outside world to understand.
A numerary member of Opus Dei usually has a profession which he exercises. I am a singer. I also conduct a choir. And then I'm involved in apostolic activities and also give spiritual guidance to some members of Opus Dei.
Muito dessa instrução espiritual ocorre nos 60 centros do Opus Dei em 19 cidades dos Estados Unidos. Em Nova York está o Murray Hill Place, sede norte-americana do Opus Dei. Um edifício de 69 milhões de dólares, construído com estoque farmacêutico doado. Homens e mulheres são completamente segregados. Há entradas e residências separadas.
We find that works. We interface with men and women all the time. It's simply that our activities are done separately and we live in a separate environment.
We are a family to each other. It's like having 10 sisters that you actually get along with and don't steal their clothes. We share all of the great ideals in common.
A categoria das numerárias auxiliares é composta de 5%, e suas tarefas principais incluem cozinhar, limpar e administrar os centros do Opus Dei.
They are homemakers, and they would see themselves playing the same role to the Opus Dei community as a regular mom does to her own family. And so for them, they see it as something that is extraordinarily fulfilling, not at all demeaning, and something that gives them great satisfaction.
Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is
É a sua rigorosa rotina diária que distingue o Opus Dei de outras organizações católicas leigas. Os membros assistem à missa e comungam todos os dias. A oração é constante.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, and at the hour of our death.
Os membros recitam uma oração exclusiva do Opus Dei em latim, chamada Preces. Os numerários são os soldados espirituais na vanguarda do Opus Dei, à disposição da prelazia em tempo integral. Deles se espera mais que sua dedicação. Eles também precisam contribuir financeiramente para a manutenção da prelazia.
All the numeraries of Opus Dei, we receive a salary and we pay from our salary. Obviously, we pay for our personal needs, whatever our expenses may be. And as a rule, we give everything else to supporting Opus Dei and the apostolates.
In their defense, that's what the apostles did. The apostles lived sort of communally. The early Christian church did that. They cared for one another. So, in a sense, you could say they're living more Christian than other Catholics are.
Talvez o aspecto mais polêmico da vida no Opus Dei seja a prática da mortificação corporal. Atos de autonegação ou dor voluntária como penitência. Uma espécie de sacrifício corporal.
Amen. I think the first thing to understand about corporal mortification is that it is a spiritual discipline with a rich and long history in the Catholic Church, and that it is practiced by plenty of people outside Opus Dei. Mother Teresa used a small whip. Padre Pio used the hair shirt and the whip and the cilice. And it has always been understood by a certain kind of Catholic spirituality as a way to participate in the suffering of Christ on the cross. Secondly, as a reminder of the pain and suffering of the world, and a kind of taming of the flesh.
No Código da Vinci, o monge vilão Silas pratica uma forma dolorosa e sangrenta de mortificação. Mas todos concordam que essa descrição dada pelo romance é exagerada.
I think if they're getting their idea of what it is from the Da Vinci Code, I don't blame them for being repulsed. I'm repulsed by that.
A adoção da mortificação pelo Opus Dei remonta diretamente ao seu fundador.
Se não te mortificas, nunca serás alma de oração. Bendita seja a dor, amada seja a dor, santificada seja a dor, glorificada seja a dor.
Simples mortificações incluem sacrifícios diários como jejum, banhos frios ou dormir no chão ou sobre tábuas sem travesseiro.
A mortification is basically doing something that you really don't want to do, but you do it for the glory of God.
Mas são as formas extremas de mortificação praticadas por alguns numerários que suscitam mais críticas.
These are the corporal mortification instruments that are used in Opus Dei. This is the discipline. They use it on their bare buttocks while they recite a Hail Mary. The cilice is like a barbed wire chain. They tie this around their thigh. They're encouraged to tie it tightly so that it digs into the skin. And they wear this for 2 hours every day except Sundays and feast days.
It's meant to be uncomfortable. That's the point of it. It's not something that, is meant to give one pleasure.
We do something hidden that nobody sees, that we don't complain about, that doesn't bother us very much, and we offer that to God. Now, why that should bother someone so much, I really don't know.
This is the nature of the spiritual quest. It tends to lead people to do things that from a secular, modern point of view are difficult to understand and in some cases are a little repulsive.
Há uma questão ainda pior. A mais incendiária acusação contra a prelazia, a de que o Opus Dei seria uma seita. Recentemente, o Opus Dei tem sido acusado de ser uma seita secreta e perigosa. Quase todas as críticas concentram-se no estilo de vida dos fidelíssimos numerários que moram nos centros do Opus Dei. A correspondência deles é censurada. Suas escolhas quanto a livros, filmes e entretenimentos requerem aprovação.
It's a controlled environment. It's an environment in which you're seldom by yourself. I started questioning in my own mind to what extent Opus Dei exerts influence and controls your life and your thinking and everything.
It was a fear of hell that allowed me to stay for so long. I've been told this was a divine vocation, and within the context of the church, if you abandon your vocation, you go to hell.
To have blind obedience and you're getting to the point where you don't question, there's where the cult difference comes. That's where it can get destructive and it's harmful to the individual.
How sad for a 17-year-old girl to give up her whole life, her whole family. For God, yeah, but for what?
Colleen O'Neill era adolescente quando entrou em 1985. Numerária auxiliar, cozinhou e lavou em vários centros do Opus Dei, nos Estados Unidos.
When I joined Opus Dei, I was told you can't call your family and you can't visit them. And we don't make long-distance phone calls and we don't go visit them. So I was like, okay. And so I didn't do that.
When one takes on a commitment, especially if one has a celibate commitment to go anywhere and do anything for the service of God, that they may not be as available to their families as they were in the past.
And my parents freaked out, like, what the heck is going on, you know? How come you're not calling us? How come you're not visiting us?
When I hear these stories from parents of children that have joined Opus Dei and have been cut off from their parents, I'm horrified. I mean, that is not what the Catholic Church is about.
O Opus Dei nega que seus membros sejam afastados de suas famílias.
They have another family too that they have acquired by free choice. They have commitments to that family and they have to balance them like any married person who gets married and has to balance two families.
Apesar das dúvidas sobre seu compromisso vitalício com o Opus Dei, O'Neill seguiu fielmente sua vocação.
I'm in this forever because you think God called you to this and you know, come hell or high water, you're going to be faithful. You're going to stick it out for the rest of your life.
When you're dealing with the cult dynamic, there's total control of information, not only externally in the physical environment, but there's internal control in terms of one's communication with oneself.
You don't have the psychological freedom to leave, and that's almost like being in a prison that you don't know you're in, and you can't get out.
Depois de 20 anos dentro do Opus Dei, O'Neill tomou uma decisão drástica.
I learned, hey, I'm under mind control here, and this just isn't right. And if my vocation was not from God and is not supernatural and divine, then what am I doing here?
Em abril de 2005, O'Neill desapareceu. A polícia pensou que ela fora raptada. Na verdade, ela estava em um hotel com uma desprogramadora de membros de seitas contratada pela família dela.
Colleen was a very typical intervention. She was disturbed inside, wanting to have some freedom, but at the same time not wanting to leave the group, not wanting to leave doing God's perfect will in her vocation.
You give up your life, you give up any money, you give up everything, absolutely everything. And once you're in, you're constantly reminded you gave everything to God.
It's true that there are people who have suffered because the question of vocation is often a question that involves the deepest, most intimate part of their being, and it's a tough question. And I really sympathize with them because at times they can put their whole life into a task and then they see it's not for them.
Estas são Diane e Tammy DiNicola. Em 1987, Tammy era caloura na faculdade de Boston, onde foi convidada para o Opus Dei, do qual foi membro por 2 anos e meio.
When I was a member, I was required to fill out a statistical sheet about all the people that I was working on to join, and I had to hand that in every month and check off, you know, has this girl been to confession with an Opus Dei priest? Have you talked apostolically with her?
Tammy, como a família de Colleen, recorreu a desprogramador de membros de seitas.
The tragedy about Opus Dei is that they transform people into almost like their own robots in some ways, where you become so disassociated from your true feelings and who you truly are, that you can shut out the people that nurtured you, that raised you, that love you.
Sua mãe, Diane, começou a entrar em contato com outras famílias católicas.
I'm just a mom who wanted to spare other families what my family went through. It was life-altering. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
Em 1991, ela criou uma organização dedicada a combater o Opus Dei. Sua atividade foi recentemente amplificada pelas vantagens da internet, atingindo milhares de pessoas.
We don't have millions of dollars. We're just a grassroots organization. And all the people who have been hurt by Opus Dei, the people that we thought we were a family of one back in the 1980s. The web is a tool for the truth. Finally, we have this thing that connects us.
She is trying to get people to look at some of the problems with the organization, and I think in many cases she has a point.
A large proportion of the members of Opus Dei don't have that experience, and that's why they hear these things, they say, well, that doesn't make any sense to me.
O Opus Dei rejeita as acusações de que age como seita, mas reconhece que ao longo dos anos houve almas magoadas.
There certainly must have been instances in the past when someone did not perform in the best way possible. But I do think that on a whole, people are trying to do their best.
I would like to express sorrow for any hurt that we may have offered to anyone and sympathy for what they suffer. But at the same time, one has to understand it's a complex situation, and it's not something that I think the blame is easily fixed on one thing or another.
Mas essas situações complexas existem, segundo observadores, devido a uma tendência histórica do Opus Dei de conduzir muitos assuntos em segredo.
Há muita gente santa que não entende o teu caminho. Não te empenhes em fazer que o compreendam. Perderás o tempo e darás lugar a indiscrições.
Escrivá was so, I would say, almost paranoid about protecting the identity of Opus Dei. He was very, very leery about any kind of collaboration with any other groups in the church on the fear that Opus Dei would be assimilated to one of these other groups.
As finanças do Opus Dei também são um assunto privado. Há muita preocupação com o tamanho de sua riqueza e o quanto ela influencia a Igreja Católica.
Usually what conspiracy theorists will say is that Opus Dei had come in, for example, with bags of cash to bail out the Vatican Bank because of its crisis in the late 70s.
Em seu livro esclarecedor sobre o Opus Dei, John Allen e um analista financeiro examinaram as contas da prelazia através de milhares de documentos, alguns públicos, alguns cedidos pelo Opus Dei.
The practical reality is that Opus Dei simply does not have the bags of cash that a lot of people imagine it does.
If you look at the financial profile of Opus Dei, their total assets is about $340 million. Their total worldwide assets, the best estimate, is about $2.8 billion. Now, you compare that to a group like the Knights of Columbus, which is almost entirely an American organization, has a financial base that is some 3 times larger than Opus Dei. And yet nobody thinks that the Knights of Columbus are scheming to manipulate the election of the Pope or to control the inner workings of the Vatican.
Apesar da polêmica e da oposição, o Opus Dei foi abraçado pela Igreja Católica quando um Papa formidável concedeu-lhe um selo especial de aprovação. Em 1978, o catolicismo ganhou um grande pontífice e estrela da mídia com a eleição do Papa João Paulo II. Esse líder dinâmico se tornaria uma força geopolítica.
This is a pope whose driving cause in Poland was the Solidarity movement, seeing labor as a way of not only toppling the Soviet system, but of redeeming the human person. So he had this fascination with the spiritual meaning, the spiritual significance of work. I think the same fire in him that led him to embrace solidarity in Poland led him to embrace Opus Dei in the Catholic Church.
A admiração de João Paulo II pela missão do Opus Dei traria um endosso papal sem precedentes. Em 1982, ele estabeleceu o Opus Dei como a única prelazia pessoal da Igreja, distinção legal pela qual São José Maria trabalhara por décadas.
So what a personal prelature does is, the members of Opus Dei, their spiritual care, their unique program of prayer, they are under the jurisdiction of the prelate, in effect, the bishop of Opus Dei, rather than the bishop of the local diocese.
O Opus Dei teve seu próprio selo de aprovação obtido em 54 anos, uma rapidez incrível para os padrões da Igreja. Para alguns observadores, esse status acarreta regalias especiais.
As the only personal prelature, it elevates Opus Dei over all the other lay organizations and lay institutes in the church. And I think one of the big questions is, why is that needed?
Então, em 2002, em uma cerimônia na Praça de São Pedro, assistida por 300 mil pessoas, o humilde padre espanhol do interior tornou-se São José Maria Escrivá.
It was very important to Opus. Opus, in a number of ways, is a very fragile organization. It exists really on the edges of Catholicism in this sense, that there's no other organization like it. It's not got a structure that many Catholics recognize. And secondly, it had this spirituality which had been subject to so much criticism.
A despeito da posição elevada de São José Maria na Igreja, o seu processo de canonização atraiu críticas de alguns.
Escrivá pretty much leapfrogged over a lot of other candidates, and you have to wonder how much of it was as a result of the influence of Opus Dei in the Vatican.
He was given a priority, probably with the blessings of the Pope, who was a great benefactor to Opus Dei, liked Opus Dei. And again, there's nothing unusual about that. There's always priorities.
A canonização de um santo é um processo complicado e caro. Envolve tribunais, investigações da vida do candidato, seus escritos, milagres realizados e testemunhos de contemporâneos. Segundo alguns, certas normas canônicas foram ignoradas.
I think it violated the canons of objectivity, fairness, and perhaps violated the integrity of the process itself. When you conduct these tribunals, you must, under canon law, search out and find critics of the candidate. Well, 11 critics wanted to appear. Only one was allowed.
Uma voz cujo testemunho foi silenciado é Maria del Carmen Tapia, ex-numerária do Opus Dei, que trabalhava em contato diário com São José Maria.
One of the main things of him that I have said many times, that he was ready to tantrums, and it's true. He was able to have a tremendous reprimand, so to every reaction. He was very impetuous, he was very impulsive.
Historicamente, porém, ser um santo não significa ser perfeito. Tem a ver com a transformação espiritual.
Saints sin like other people do. They live the same lives as we do, or live in the same world, but their insight into what life is all about is different.
Some of the most popular saints historically have been people whose lives you wouldn't dream of imitating. It's not as possible to imitate them, and yet there's more devotion to them. Escrivá is not an untypical character, frankly.
Escrivá diceva, era santo non è il cristiano che non ha difetti, è il cristiano che lotta contro i difetti fino all'ultimo momento della sua vita.
Alguém escreveu que toda instituição é a sombra prolongada de um homem. Para o Opus Dei, a odisseia épica de São José Maria Escrivá, desde uma visão até um grupo mundial, deixou um projeto formidável.
I think that when the history of Opus Dei comes to be written, it's going to be one of the exciting stories in the history of expansion of an institution in the Catholic Church.
Opus Dei wants to grow. We think we have a message that society wants to hear. We want to get our message across.
No wonder that Opus Dei ends up being in the Da Vinci Code. And no wonder it becomes a metaphor for secret and threatening societies. They've created that themselves. They can change it.
It's the same today that was 50 years ago. For God's sake, if they have to survive, they have to change. Because life is a constant change.
Certainly we've learned many things over these last 50 years of doing Opus Dei in the United States. We're doing a lot better, we're learning many things, and I hope that problems will diminish.
Opus Dei is saying that the conversion of the secular world can't be done by a caste of people wearing Roman collars, standing on the outside and wagging their fingers at it. It's got to be done by lay people who live and move inside that secular world. That is the perennial challenge facing the Church. The jury is still out on whether or not it's actually going to work.